All right, this is DSR. I'm Bruce. Welcome back. And today we're going to talk about Artificers. I was going to hold off on this until the Artificers new book comes out in December, but I feel like I did them dirty with that comment I made in that video I did on the party rolls. And I didn't mean to come across as saying Artificers aren't cool, they're not fun. I don't mean any of that. Artificer is one of my favorite classes to play. I think Artificer and Druid are my two most favorite. Really, what I was saying is this is a commentary on the design or kind of a poor design for the base Artificer class. I think they missed the mark, and we'll get into some of that here, but I'm not saying that there aren't ways to make the Artificer great. You just have to kind of know what you're doing and how to put different things together, especially if you're multi-classing. They can be just fine. You can have a lot of fun. So I love doing it, so let me walk you through some of that. Let's compare the Artificer base class, the Paladin base class, and the Ranger base class. All three of those are the three half-caster classes, and then we'll also compare the subclasses of the Artificer to the Artificer base class. I think this is a good comparison, and having all the classes on here just didn't fit on the screen, but if you want to know how the Artificer base class rates against all the, or at least how I rate the Artificer base class against all the other classes in the game, you can download that from the Google Drive. But you can see here that I didn't rate the Artificer base class very highly on anything, but you can see that the subclasses really bring them up. So especially the armor subclass. So let's go through them. And as a reminder, this is only tier 1. So we're talking you're level 4 right now. Okay. So the Alchemist subclass isn't really doing a lot for you in tier 1. It barely squeaks you into a B on support. And even then, I think that's fairly generous. It's like a B minus. They just don't do a lot for you. And we're going to go through all the features and kind of show how I got those ratings. The armor, on the other hand, does quite well. They give you a solid A in the tanking category. They increase your damage, your range damage potential to a C, and can be a pretty good scout. So I give them a B in the scouting category for rolls. The Artillerist does a pretty good job, brings them up to a B on the ranged attacker damage. Their blaster capability is increased, but it's still a C, so they're not yet going to feel like a great blaster, although they in higher levels start to do even better. Yeah, and the Artillerist comes in at a B on support, which I don't think is intuitive to people at first, but as you start digging into the class, you can see that they actually have some solid support functions. Lastly is the Battlesmith. I'd give them a C as a tank. It's kind of like trying to turn the Ranger into a tank, but they are a solid frontliner, and they have good range damage as well. You can see that the Artificer's primary ability score is Intelligence. The Paladin's primary ability score is Strength and Charisma. And the Ranger's primary ability scores are Dexterity and Wisdom. And with your primary ability score, using a point-buy system, you definitely want that at a 17. And for those classes that have two primary ability scores, you're going to have to choose. And you'll need to choose whichever one is going to affect the role that's most important to you. You want that one to be highest. So if you're, for example, a Paladin, Strength and Charisma both really mean a lot to the Paladin. It really comes down to, are you going to be wanting to lean into more of the Paladin as a fighter, as a weapon user? If so, you need the Strength. If you want to be leaning into the Paladin's ability to be a support and healer, then you want to get your Charisma as high as it can be. And it's really hard to raise two ability scores. You can start off with both at 16 and 17, but you only get so many feats over the course of your entire career of a character, and you can only, you'll raise 1 to 20 by level 8 or 12, and you might get the other one to 20 by level 16 or 20, but that's only if you didn't really take any other feats along the way. You just kept raising your ability scores. So you kind of have to decide, is that what you really want to be doing? How do you want to play this character, and for how long do you want to play this character stronger in this role than that role? So the Artificer only has one really important ability score, and that's Intelligence. Although for Artificers, you can see that they have training in medium armor and shields. So all medium armor gives you a base AC and then adds up to 2 AC from your dexterity modifier. So you really want that dexterity for your Artificer to be a 14. That's going to give you the best AC you can get, and it's always good to have a high AC. The other thing you're going to want is at least a 14 in Constitution. That's important for your hit points. It's always good to have some hit points and not die to just a few shots. But also, that's going to be important for your concentration, or maintaining your concentration, making Constitution saving throws. So you want a 14 there. And then a 17 with your Intelligence. Now, to get to the 17 Intelligence, you're going to have to choose certain backgrounds that will give you those bonuses. So you really want to get a background that gives you intelligence and either dexterity or constitution, so that you can get a 14, a 14, and a 17. And you can see that for the armorer, I raised the constitution to 16. I do recommend that you get a 16 in constitution as the armorer. If you're going to try to be the tank, which is the best thing for the armor, then you need a lot of hit points, and artificers have only a D8 hit points, unlike the paladin and ranger who have a D10. You can see that they've got, the D10s there. So you're right out of the gate have less hit points. And so you need to make up for that with getting the highest constitution you can get. You can also see that with the armor, I still kept the 14 dexterity, even though they're going to wear heavy armor. You only need that 14 dexterity if you're going to try to be a contributor to the scout role. If you don't care about trying to scout as your artificer, then go ahead and dump your dexterity as low as you want, 10 or even 8. With your heavy armor, it's not going to change your AC at all. And you can see that there's a column next to the ability scores where I put points remaining, and that's just ability points remaining. You can see with the artificer that you have 6 ability points remaining that you can distribute to strength, wisdom, or charisma, or even to dexterity or constitution if you want to get those higher. You could get one of those to a 16. Or you could put some points in those other ability scores if you don't want them to be 8s. You can see that the Artificer is also starting off behind on martial capability with only having proficiency in simple weapons, whereas the Paladin and Ranger get all martial weapons and all simple weapons. And of course, the Paladin and Ranger are getting fighting styles and weapon masteries. Now, weapon masteries are new, so the Artificer wouldn't have it yet, but even in the UA that they did for the Artificer, they didn't give him weapon masteries either. So I don't think they're going to end up with weapon masteries even in the update they're going to get coming in December. And you can see that the Battlesmith is getting proficiency in all martial weapons as well. So the Battlesmith is kind of helping them catch up a little bit with the base class of the Paladin and Ranger. But that's kind of the point of why I said that the Artificer is, I think, in my opinion, not designed well, because a lot of the subclasses are having to give you features to catch up with what the Paladin and Ranger base class is already giving you. Now, the background you want to choose from the 2024 core rules backgrounds would be one that at least gives you the intelligence increase. Ideally, intelligence and dexterity or constitution. You really need that intelligence boost. Everything you do as an artificer is based on your intelligence. So you do want that boost of intelligence. The ones I've highlighted are the ones that are going to give you intelligence and either dex or constitution. So you're really ideally choosing between artisan, criminal, merchant, sage, and scribe. Those are the only ones that have the right combination you're looking for. And with the armor, you really need that constitution boost to get it to the 16. So you would have to choose from only criminal, merchant, or sage. As far as skill proficiencies you're going to get from your base classes, you can see up on the in the table up here what's going to be available to you. Artificers get 2 proficiencies, paladins get 2 proficiencies, rangers are going to have 3 proficiencies and 1 expertise at this level. And you can see that the artificer doesn't have access to most of the skills you're going to need to be a good scout or a good face for the party. They have some of those in the form of sleight of hand and perception. Those can contribute towards being good at the scout role, but they have really access to nothing that's going to help them be the face of the party. So if you really want to try to lean into one of those things, you are relying on your background or your species to give you access to those skills that you're going to need to be good at those roles. Okay, and here is how your spells are going to contribute to your ability to fill one of the 10 roles. So let's walk through those, starting with the base classes. So the Artificer, the one advantage they have that the Paladin Ranger don't have is that the Artificer can change all of their spells, every spell they have prepared, in one long rest. The Paladin in 2014 used to be able to do that, and they took it away. Interestingly, the Ranger used to be able to only change a spell prepared when they gained a level in the Ranger class. And you can see that both the Paladin and the Ranger, they normalize that to they get to change one spell on a long rest. Both of them are the same. So the Paladin kind of lost a little bit of flexibility. The Ranger gained some flexibility. And frankly, I don't think most people are going to notice that loss in flexibility for the Paladin. I think changing one spell on a long rest is usually going to cover your need most of the time. And if you really need to change more spells, you can just take multiple long rests. I suspect they're going to take the Artificer to that same level as well, so that all 3 of the half-casters are normalized. They're all going to be able to prepare 5 spells. You're all going to have 3 first-level spell slots. None of them have anything that functions like a spell slot, a bonus like a spell slot, kind of like and that's something like Meta Magic or Mystic Arcanums are going to give you things that are like a spell slot, and their max level spell slot is first level. This is tier 1, so they're level 4. So they're only going to have first level spells. Now, these next few columns, let me explain how that works real quick. I went through the entire spell list of all the spells and the spells they have access to, and went through and figured out at tier 1 how many of these spells, for example, in the blaster column, there are 2 spells that are really important to being a good blaster. And in tier 1, there are 5 spells that can make you a good controller. Now, you don't necessarily need all 5 of them to be a good controller, but you need some of them to be a good controller. There are 6 spells that are really important for being a good healer in tier 1. There are 4 spells that are important for being a good support in tier 1. And there are 11 spells that can contribute to being a good scout in tier 1, and 6 spells that can contribute to being a good face in tier 1. Now, that doesn't mean other spells, there aren't other spells in those categories. They're just, those aren't the most important spells, right? Like, I'll give you some examples for the blaster. Usually the most effective spells for being a good blaster are where you get to choose the range, and then there's an area of effect that occurs at that range and doesn't emanate from you, like a lightning bolt or burning hands. Those emanate out from you and go out to an area. And the reason why you usually don't want spells that emanate out from you, that means you have to be right up next to them. Or there's a good chance you're going to hit allies, right? Those are harder to position. Now, there's still plenty of scenarios that are going to happen. Sometimes they're going to be niche where you can still use those spells effectively. It's just that's not going to be contributing as a area of effect blast spell all the time. You really need those spells that are going to be ones where you can choose the spot on the battlefield and then it emanates out from that spot. In tier 1, there's really only 2 good blaster spells that are going to really contribute, and that's Ice Knife at level 1 and level 2 Shatter. Now, neither of those are super great overall as blast spells. Once you get to tier 3 and you've got access to Fireball, that's the primary blast spell you're going to be using most of the time. But we're talking tier 1, so that's all that is available. And so I went through, and that's what these numbers here are indicating, is how many of those really important spells for that category do you have access to. And you can see the Artificer has access to none of the important blast spells, none of the important controller spells. They have access to 1 of the 6 important healer spells. They have access to 1 of the important support spells, 3 of the important scout spells, and 2 of the important face spells. Now, the Ranger and Paladin are roughly in the same spot for a lot of those, where they don't have access to a lot of those, which is why those are all marked, or the color for all those is red. The Paladin is slightly better off in the support category. They've got access to 2 of the important 4 support spells in tier 1, but that's not enough to make them, based on their spellcasting ability alone, rank very highly in the support role. But they do have other features that contribute. So that's why the Paladin is a B in support, even though their spells would only probably qualify them for a C. And the Ranger doesn't have a lot of the important spells needed to be a good scout in tier 1, but they have access to the stealth and the other skills you're going to need to be good at a good scout. And they have access to 3 of the important scout spells, and the Ranger also has access to expertise. So they get expertise in stealth. So all of those things come together and gives them an A as a scout, even though they don't have access to all of the important scout spells. So just to give you an idea of how that all works together. So let's look at what these specific spells are that qualify or that contribute in significant ways to these 6 roles. I'm not going to read off every spell, but you can see, the Artificer has access to almost none of them. We're looking at a total of 7 of the important spells for any of these roles, with the Alchemist being the only subclass that gives access to 1 important spell for one of these roles. And that's because the Alchemist gives access in tier 1 to Healing Word. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, hey, a lot of these level 2 spells are on the Artificer spell list. Why didn't you say they have access to that? I remind you, this is tier 1, which means the Artificer only has access to first level spells. So even though some of these level 2 spells are on their spell list, they don't have access to them in tier 1. They're only going to get access to these at level 5, which is tier 2. Okay, now let's compare the features you're going to get that are harder to put into a table. So you can see this is what you're going to get at levels 1, 2, and 3. I don't think there's any base class or subclass that gives any features at level 4. Correct me if I'm wrong. Usually that's an empty spot for all of them, because that's when you get a feat. So I don't think any subclass or class gives you a feature at level 4. The Paladin, level 1, Lay on Hands. This one is really strong. It gives you a whole pool of additional healing that you can use as a bonus action, which is great, which means you're still using your action to attack. It also allows you to cure the poison condition, which is the biggest reason you'd want to have the Lesser Restoration spell prepared. I mean, Lesser Restoration does some other things, But the most common one you're going to deal with is poisoned, which is great. So that means that the paladin doesn't have to prepare the lesser restoration spell, which they wouldn't get to level 5 anyway. So this one feature really ups the paladin's ability to be a good healer in the party without having to really make any decisions, right? You don't have to choose Lay on of Hands. You just get it for free from your base class, and you're a decent healer, which is why I gave the Paladin a B in healing, mostly for this feature. Then at level 2, you get Paladin Smite. So they get one free casting of Divine Smite, and they always have it prepared, which is a great feature. Divine Smite is a good way to add damage, especially when you crit. Crit does double the damage dice from this Divine Smite spell. So it's a great on-demand extra damage boost. Really contributes to them being good frontliners, or even trying to be skirmishers if they want. And then at level 3, they've got their Channel Divinity. Now, from the base class, this is mostly a ribbon, right? The ability to do Divine Sense tells you the location of celestials, fiends, and undead for the next 10 minutes within 60 feet. Can help. If you can't see them for some reason, you will know their location. So you could target them with abilities that don't require you to see them, because you would know where they are, which means you can make attack rolls with disadvantage, but at least you know which square they're in. It also can reveal, if they're disguised for some reason. So it has some uses. It's not very powerful. Really, the big value of your Channel Divinity is going to come from your subclass, which we're not comparing with, or we're not going to get into with Paladins today. Then you've got Homunculus Servant, which is actually pretty interesting. It creates a pet for you. It's a pretty small pet, but it does have an attack. And it does have a range of 30 feet, so it doesn't have to get right up into melee. It does take your bonus action to command it to do anything but dodge, so it does function very much like a pet for other pet classes. It has very low hit points, low AC, so it's going to be killed pretty easy, but it is stronger than a familiar, and it can attack. And it's an interesting way to weaponize your bonus action. A lot of times, most classes don't have a lot of uses for their bonus actions at this level. Then you have Replicate Magic Item. A lot of these are niche, very circumstantial. Probably Bag of Holding and Goggles of Night are the two most used ones. It's not very often that you're going underwater in Tier 1. It can happen. I don't think I've ever seen it in any of the adventures I've run, but it can happen. And you definitely might want to have access to that at a later point, but when you level up, you can swap out which infusions you know. So, that might be something actually you want to be more interested in at later tiers of play. And then here's a couple of requirements you have to keep in mind. The Armor of Magical Strength and the Mind Sharpener both have attunement requirements. The Homunculus Servant has a requirement of a gem that costs 100 gold pieces. Now, you can reuse that if the Homunculus Servant is destroyed and you recreate it. So it's not consumed, but you do have to have that, which is actually can be pretty hard to come by in Tier 1. So keep that in mind. Now, from the Alchemist subclass, you're going to get a few features. At level 3, you get Tool Proficiency, which is really just a ribbon. You're going to gain proficiency with the Alchemist supplies. Very thematic for the subclass. It can be useful if your Dungeon Master is going to play with downtime and magic item crafting. This actually lets you create, in 2024, any potion in the game. So can be quite useful, but if your DM doesn't play with that, totally useless. Then you're going to get some spells at third level. You're just going to get Healing Word and Ray of Sickness. Now, Healing Word is an important healing spell. It gives you a bonus action heal and at range, so that's good. But Ray of Sickness is not a great spell, and that's an attack spell. The Alchemist in Tier 1 is just a pretty poor damage dealer in general. So that's unfortunate that that's the other spell they get. The big feature that the Alchemist gets is this feature called Experimental Elixir. That's supposed to differentiate them. Unfortunately, you're only going to get one that you create automatically as part of when you finish a long rest. You get a few more at higher levels, but that's Tier 2 and Tier 3 respectively. But unfortunately, the one free one that you get, or the 2 or 3 free ones that you get, are random on which effect you get off of this list. You roll randomly, and I guess it's what makes it an experimental elixir. The effects are pretty small, and even the healing one, which used to be a decent healing method, is devalued because of the increase to the Cure Wounds spell. So the Cure Wounds spell used to be 1d8 plus your spellcasting modifier, which is actually a lower average than 2d4 plus your spellcasting modifier, which for our Alchemist is Intelligence. So this actually healed slightly better than the Cure Wounds spell. And you can create more of these elixirs by expending a spell slot. You just expend any level spell slot and you create another elixir as long as you have a vial available. And when you create one that way by expending a spell slot, you get to choose the effect. So it's no longer experimental, which makes it better. But previously, it probably made more sense to create these healing potions, these healing elixirs, instead of using Cure Wounds. Now Cure Wounds is just a lot better. It's 2d8 plus your spellcasting modifier. So that no longer makes sense even with the experimental elixir. Then there's the Swiftness. That's basically the effect of a Longstrider spell. Resilience, which gives a +1 to AC. Now, there's not a lot of ways to get +1 to AC. You could cast the Warding Bond spell on someone, and that gives them +1 AC. But now you're running the risk of splitting the damage with them. Then you have Boldness, which is basically the effect of a Bless spell. And this, interestingly, stacks with Bless. So if you put Bless on somebody and give them this, now they're rolling 2d4 to increase every attack roll and every saving throw they make for 1 minute. So that stacks nicely. Then there's Flight, which gives you a 10 flight speed for 10 minutes, which is really slow. But there's not a lot of ways to get Flight in Tier 1. This is one of the few ways to get Flight in Tier 1. It's not great for combat because you're moving so slowly, but if there is something out of combat that you just really have to fly for, this gives you a great way to solve that. And then Transformation. This gives you the effect of the Alter Self spell, which is just a pretty poor spell all around. It's not great. And it has some uses, but generally not better than other spells at even lower levels that you could cast instead. So probably the best part of the Alter Self spell is it gives you the ability to breathe underwater, which if you really need that, you could get the Cap of Water Breathing as one of your infusions. But if you don't have that and you just run into a scenario where you need water breathing, this would be a way to do it. So kind of several different circumstantial abilities here, none of them really strong, and of course diminished by the fact that you have to spend an action to drink it, and on top of the action to create it. So you would not be creating these you could create these in the middle of combat, but you're talking about spending now 2 actions to gain the effect, the action to create it and the action to drink it. But the action to drink it alone, it really devalues these. Ideally, it's something that you would know that combat is coming and be able to drink these right before combat. Or you could ask your DM, in 2024, they changed potions so that they're all consumed and administered as a bonus action. Now, an elixir is not explicitly a potion, but your DM may allow it, and frankly, I would, just to make these a little bit better, because it's quite a weak feature. And this is your premier feature that you get as an alchemist. So anything that helped the poor alchemist out, I would be a fan of. And for the armor subclass, you have Tools of the Trade. This gives you your proficiency in heavy armor, which is really important. And then it gives you proficiency with smith tools, which is either a ribbon feature and basically doesn't do much mechanically at all for you, unless your DM plays with downtime and magic item crafting. Then this is great because it allows you to craft magical metal weapons and armor. And then your armor spells, you get only 2 in Tier 1. That's Magic Missile and Thunder Wave. Neither of these is going to do much to help you in being a good tank or scout, or really much of any of the roles that you could possibly be good at as an armorer. So another disappointing feature, really. And now here is a great feature that the armorer gets, which is Arcane Armor. This lets you take armor and turn it into arcane armor. It's not the same as an infusion, but kind of works like an infusion where you turn a non-magical item into arcane armor, but it lets you actually turn magical items into arcane armor as well. It does a few important things for you. One, it removes the strength requirement so that you don't have to get like a 15 in strength in order to wear plate armor. So quite important. It allows you to use the armor as your spellcasting focus. So that frees up a hand. Spells that use somatic and material components, or just material components. And then there's a couple of niche things here where you can doff and don it as an action instead of 5 to 10 minutes like regular armor. It also gives you this feature where it can't be removed from you unless you want it to be removed. That, I can only think of one campaign I've ever played where that came up, where you were captured and had your stuff taken from you. This can come up, but it's going to be pretty rare. And then this is another feature, but really is just part of Arcane Armor, which is the armor model. And it's got 2 models, Guardian and Infiltrator right now. The Guardian model is really your tanking model. That one gives you these Thunder Gauntlets and the defensive field feature. The Thunder Gauntlets are what are going to allow you to do that soft taunt. Every time you hit a creature, it now has disadvantage to attack anyone but you. So you're encouraging it to attack you, and this is the better way to encourage things to attack you than reckless attack, right? Reckless attack gives them a better chance of hitting you. This gives them a worse chance of hitting all of your allies. So that's actually reducing the net damage for the party. And then you have defensive field, which is going to give you a few temporary hit points. This really isn't enough at tier 1 to be making up the difference between the your lower hit die and like the paladin and rangers hit die or other tanks, but it's better than nothing, so that's good. The infiltrator model, this is the one that's going to help you be a good scout. So it gives you a lightning launcher, which is a ranged attack, and I should say that both the lightning launcher and the thunder gauntlets are going to use your intelligence instead of strength or dexterity to make the attacks. So that's great because that allows you to focus on intelligence as your primary ability score and really raise that as fast as you can. The lightning launcher is about the same damage as like a short bow, has comparable range, and it does lightning damage. It gives an extra 1d6 damage once per turn on each of your turns. So in tier 1, it's actually decent damage, but it doesn't really scale. So it falls off in later tiers. The other thing you're getting with your infiltrator model is the powered steps, a small walking speed increase, which is good. And then you have dampening field. And this is the thing that really allows you to be that as a, the base subclass, or as just a subclass of armor, be a B-rated, B-ranked scout. And you can build on that depending on what background you choose to give you proficiency in stealth. And you could even choose the skill expert feat at level 4 to give you expertise in stealth and really crank up your ability to be a reliable scout. But it's really this feature. Now, the thing you're going to have to do, though, keep in mind is that all heavy armor and about half of the medium armors are going to cause disadvantage on all stealth checks. So in order to be effective at both of these things, which you can do, you're going to have to switch between armors that you're wearing. So you're going to take the time to, take off the heavy armor, put on like a chain shirt or a breastplate that doesn't have the disadvantage, and then you'll get the advantage from this, and now you have a permanent, always-on advantage with your dexterity stealth checks. Now, it will cancel out the disadvantage you have on the heavy armors, but if you want to be a good scout, you really need that permanent advantage, not just lack of disadvantage. All right, this is a great feature, and this is what gives the armor an A ranking as a tank and a B as a scout, which are the two highest rankings that the armorer gets. And it's all really this feature and the access to the heavy armor proficiency. And with the Artillerist, first off, you get level 3, you get a tool proficiency. This is a ribbon feature. Unless your DM plays with downtime and allows you to craft magic items, then this is pretty useful. The Artillerist spells you're going to get at level 3 are Shield and Thunderwave. Shield is great for survivability. Thunderwave isn't going to do a lot. It's not a great blast spell, pretty niche in use. Probably the most useful thing is if you're stuck in melee and you want to try to get out of melee, you can use this to try to push all the enemies back and you can escape. But neither of these are really going to help you do a lot to fulfill any of the important roles in a party. And then the primary or premier feature you're going to get as an Artillerist that sets you apart is the Eldritch Cannon. And this actually is a pretty interesting feature. It creates an object that can either be tiny or small. If you create it tiny, then you just carry it. If you create it as a small object, it can walk around and be separate from you and doesn't have to be in your space. So it can walk around other spaces. It doesn't count as a creature, so it doesn't get any actions. And it has an AC of 18 and a decent number of hit points. But it's going to have a +0 on all of its saving throws and ability checks. So you probably don't want to be sending it into melee. But you can repair it with a mending spell. And mending spell is a cantrip. You can just cast at will. Now, the mending cantrip takes a whole minute, so you can't really use that in combat to keep it alive. But out of combat, as long as you're not rushed for time, you can basically use that to just repair the thing back up to full. Now, an interesting downside of the Eldritch Cannon is that it only lasts 1 hour, and you get 1 free cannon per long rest. And once you've used that 1 hour of that 1 free cannon, or it gets destroyed, you have to expend a spell slot to create another one. So this is creating a kind of a big tax on your spell slots just to use the main feature of your subclass. But when you have it and you're making use of it, it's actually decently useful. The flamethrower is basically like a burning hands. It's similar damage. It is the same size, and you can just do it every round. Now, the cannon you activate as a bonus action. So you have your action to do something useful, whether you are casting a Cure Wounds spell or shooting some sort of spell to deal damage or a control spell. You can do that as your action and then activate the Eldritch Cannon as your bonus action. So you have a built-in bonus action every round as long as you have the cannon available. That's kind of a free Burning Hands. And since you can make this separate, if there's you're going to fight where there's a lot of minions and you want to send this into melee, you can, and have it just do flamethrower while you're standing far back out of danger, and it can do a cone of damage as long as it lasts. Now, if it's the only thing on the front line, it's not going to last at all, so I'd be careful about that. Then the Force Ballista is really what you're going to use if you want to lean into that role of being a ranged attacker. So you're going to use like a Firebolt cantrip as your action, and then you're going to activate the Force Ballista as your bonus action, and you're going to make 2 attacks, and it actually comes out to be pretty decent damage. But if you want to lean into being a good support, now this is what I think is kind of the non-intuitive aspect of the Artillerist. If you use the cannon to be the protector, it can give out a lot of temporary hit points. You can use it on every one of your turns as your bonus action to grant temporary hit points to all of your allies within 10 feet of it. And it's a decent number of temporary hit points. 1d8 plus your intelligence modifier, you're looking at, at this level, probably 8.5, 8 to 9 temporary hit points every round. And there's no resource consumption with that. Just every round you're giving out these temporary hit points. That is a lot of temporary hit points to be granting every round. So that is a strong support feature. And last but not least, we have the Battlesmith subclass for the Artificer. Starting off with the tool proficiency, which is, like I said, for every other one, either a ribbon or a decent feature, depending on whether or not your DM plays with downtime and magic item crafting. Then you have the Battlesmith spells, which are at tier 1, Heroism and Shield. Shield is fantastic, especially if you're going to go on the front lines, which is one of the ways that you can build a Battlesmith. And Heroism is also good for being on the front line. It's going to give you immunity to the frightened condition and give you a decent chunk of temporary hit points every turn, every round on your turn. And then you have the Battle Ready feature that gives you proficiency with all martial weapons and allows you to use your intelligence on the attack and damage rolls with that weapon, as long as it is magical or has one of your infusions on it. So that, again, much like the armor, allows you to focus on intelligence as your primary ability score and not have to worry about strength and dexterity. Now, you're going to have that dexterity of 14 just to get your AC up, but that's not really high enough for that to be your attack ability. If that's the ability you're going to use for all your attack rolls, that's 14 is not high enough. You really want to get it to at least a 16 or higher for tier 1. And you get the Steel Defender, which is a pet. So this is the Battlesmith is a pet class, which is great. Much like all the other pet classes, it only takes the dodge action unless you use your bonus action to command it to do anything else. It can use its reaction normally, and frankly, if you're going to use it as a frontliner, which is how you should use it in order to contribute to that score that I gave the Battlesmith as a frontliner, you do need to be sending your Steel Defender into the front lines, into melee. It's actually not a bad idea to just let it take the dodge action and then use its reaction to impose disadvantage on anybody attacking an ally near it. That's not a bad way to use it, especially if you have something else you want to be doing with your bonus action. If you don't have something else you want to be doing with your bonus action, then having it just attack is actually going to double the damage you can deal. So pretty decent. It lasts indefinitely, which is great. It can be destroyed because it's going to have not as many hit points as you have, but not a terrible amount either. It's a lot better than the Homunculus Servant, and you can repair it with a Mending Cantrip again, which is, again, a cantrip. It doesn't use any resource to cast it, but it does take a minute to cast the Mending Cantrip, so you're not going to be mending your Steel Defender in the middle of combat. Stat block is decent. For a pet, not one of the best pets, but like I said, far better than the Homunculus Servant. It's got okay armor class. Its hit points are decent as far as pets go. It's not like a super strong stat block all around. It will use like all the other pets, it is going to use your spell attack modifier, which is based on your intelligence when it makes an attack. So it'll have a good chance to hit. The damage it's going to deal is 1d8 plus your proficiency bonus. So that's okay. It never scales to multiple attacks, unfortunately, unlike the Ranger Beastmaster, but it can use its action to repair itself, which is interesting, so it can stay on the front lines longer, or it can repair other constructs or objects. So that is an interesting option as well. Maybe when you're in tier 4 and you have access to the Summon Construct spell as an Artificer, this could be repairing your summoned construct. And then, like I mentioned, it's got that reaction to deflect attack. This is basically the same thing as the fighting style called Protection, which isn't a great fighting style, but your Steel Defender doesn't have any other reactions that it wants to use, it might as well use this to impose disadvantage when an enemy attacks you or an ally, which is better than nothing, and can certainly help. The Steel Defender is really the feature that's giving you that C rank as a tank potential, or B rank as a frontliner. It's a decent feature, and I hope this helped. I'm sure I got some things wrong. I probably missed some things. Please let me know, what you think I got wrong in the comments, or if you have different ideas or things you just disagree on. And I hope this helps. Thank you very much.